This case should never have come to trial.
I don't think it's fair to call my clients frauds. Because one time I turned into a dog and they helped me. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would like to withdraw our plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty.
This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries, of a sham.
If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves.
And the truth shall set you free!
How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Oh, guilty, but with a real good excuse.
I think the truth will come forth.
You can't handle the truth!
Hello, everybody. It's time for more Law Light, brought to you, as always, by Foreman Watson Holtry, FWH Legal. And we're excited. We're here today at a snowy 530 Frederica Street, the high-rise white brick edifice. And it's white for many reasons today, PJ.
It is.
We got an April snow.
We did.
Yeah. How did that fit you?
Well, when I looked, I heard it was coming because I heard it was going to get really cold, and then someone said something about it snowing in Illinois, which, I mean, obviously doesn't necessarily affect us, I guess, but apparently it did.
Yeah,
so I looked out the window, and everything was covered in snow.
I was at my home office last night finishing up this brief that's just been sucking the life out of me, and my daughter texted me, and she said, hey, she was going to come home from a friend's house, and she goes, how are the roads? And I was like, what is she talking about? Because I'd just been like in my office.
Yeah.
So I get up and I walk over to the window and I look out and everything's white. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I walk outside and made sure that there was nothing really on the roads. But I
threw
said,
some
hey,
snowballs at your neighbors.
I said, hey, come, it's okay. Just, be careful. And so, but yeah, snow in April. Last time I remember that happening, I was in law school and we had to postpone a law school softball game because of snow on the field. So that's the last time I remember it being that late in the year, but I'm sure maybe it's happened.
Right.
So. Well, listen, I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about snow in April because we have a very important guest.
We do.
That you were able to get on the show. You're batting 1,000 on your guests. You get somebody, they show up. Now, we're going to have to get on Vincent about one effort. And so anyhow, not to beat a dead horse on that, but we are glad to have today with us Claude Bacon from LinGate Hospitality. He's the Vice President of LinGate Hospitality. And this is an interesting one, PJ, because a lot of times people that you have a track record with or a history with that you say, hey, they'd be a great guest. I don't know them from a man in the moon, and
right.
Vice versa. I'll bring people on that you haven't ever had any discussion with or know. But
yeah.
Claude is somebody that we both kind of have had a little season of our life with, and so today we're going to jump right in. But I guess we'll start. Why don't you kind of introduce Claude and kind of get some of his background, and we'll go from there.
All right, so it's not very often that I get to become the host.
All right,
the last time
great.
I was the host, it was because Travis was out of town.
I was in trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think the first time you were in Florida, and then the next time was and then the next time was I'm pretty sure that was trial, but yeah. So I mean, the whole point of having a guest is to have you talk. So rather than me give your whole background, just kind of give us a brief, 60-second synopsis. Where are you from originally,
Gotcha,
and up to now?
Yeah. So I'm a native of Hopkins County over in Madisonville, Kentucky. Married to my wife, Samantha, now. We'll celebrate our 20-year anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
In October, yeah. So I got that going for me. And so I have two daughters, Maggie Beth Bacon, who's a senior here at Davis County High School, and Hadley Kate Bacon, who will be a ninth grader at Davis County High School this year, currently an eighth grader at the middle school. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I've been in Owensboro now, gosh, let's see, about 16 years. So this is home and has been home for a while. We moved here from Bowling Green, and my life, my professional career started out in higher education. I was a higher education guy for the majority of my career. I worked for a small United Methodist school in Columbia, Kentucky, Lindsey Wilson College. That was my first job out of college, which I'm a two-time graduate of Western Kentucky University. So go Hilltoppers!
Yes, that's
my
right.
undergraduate
We
degree
share that in
there.
common.
That's right, share that in common. Then a graduate degree in communications there. So my first job out of college was in at Lindsey Wilson. I spent 5 just wonderful years there. What a great institution that is. Then had the pleasure and opportunity to work for my alma mater back at Western Kentucky University, where I was director of major gift development for the athletic department. And then my travels brought me to a dean's position at Kentucky Wesleyan College. So that's what got me to Owensboro, and just had an incredible 2 years with Kentucky Wesleyan. It was a time when my background in admissions, financial aid, and development was at a point of need at the college. So we broke a 50-year enrollment record, my first year up there in the admissions office. I had an incredible staff, and that was all due to that staff and just what I had learned over time in admissions and financial aid through working for those institutions. And then a great friend of mine, Glenn Higdon, called one day and said that the president of his company had taken another job, and because of our relationship at Western Kentucky University through the athletic department, said, would you like to get in the hotel business? And I said, gosh, what do you want with a higher ed guy, in the hotel business? And again, we just had a great relationship, friend and professional relationship. So my wife and I talked about it and prayed a lot about it and thought, if you're ever going to make that leap out of a career, 12 years, it's pretty deep into it. So you better do it now if you're going to. And I did. And that's now been almost 14 years ago at LinGate, and just been an incredible journey. Hospitality is an incredibly rewarding career. And working for a small company and a family-owned company like Glenn's company has just been an honor.
That's awesome. So what are all the different hotels, because I know there's been significant growth around here since you and I first met, because I've always known you to be in the the hospitality business.
Right, that's right.
So what are all the different hotels that LinGate oversees?
Yeah, so we have about 20 hotels in our portfolio now. That portfolio has changed over time. The ebb and flow of our industry goes with the sale of hotels, and then whether you maintain those management agreements or not.
Right.
And since I've been there, gosh, we've sold a number of hotels over time. In fact, our largest portfolio at one time was in Texas.
Oh, wow.
We had hotels in Austin and Round Rock and San Antonio and Houston and College Station, but all those hotels are now sold and gone to other management companies and other ownership groups. So right now we have hotels in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. About 20 total out of that group. And here locally, we have the Holiday Inn Owensboro Riverfront, just down here on our beautiful landscape here, and then the Courtyard by Marriott out on Highway 54. The other hotels that we have in Kentucky are in Paducah and Lexington and Bardstown, Elizabethtown, and some other places. Then we've got a little pod of hotels up in the Columbus area, on the east end of Columbus and west end of Columbus. So nice little pod there. And then another little pod down in Nashville and the Knoxville area. Right. So, yeah.
Now, you've always been more of a face, not a figurehead, because you're always out talking to people in the community, stuff like that. So I'm assuming you travel to these different locations. You don't do everything from afar. Am I correct in that thinking?
That's right. Our corporate office is here in Owensboro, and so all the corporate employees are out of that right over in Springbank. But then you're right. We do travel extensively to all those hotels, overseeing and managing and troubleshooting if that's the case, and just a multitude of factors when it comes into the corporate side of what we do. But I can tell you the incredible hard work that the general managers and directors of sales and housekeeping and front desk and all those employees are really the lifeblood of the hospitality business. And we may transition over to the pandemic in hospitality, but it has been incredibly challenging, and the employees that are in the hotels have just been fantastic to hang in with what they've had to endure and do.
Right. So speaking of which, and you and I had actually talked about this here recently, was the pandemic. And we tend to bring it up occasionally if it makes sense to do so, but obviously it's with the pandemic and the hotel industry. I mean, and like I said, you and I have had this conversation, but for those listening, how did the pandemic affect how you operate or just the daily operations of the hotel business?
Yeah, and I'll speak industry wide for a second, and this is kind of coast to coast. Devastated is the word. I mean, it's hard to underscore a different term for what happened. I mean, we went from nationally, and again, I don't want to quote too many national statistics because I don't have them in front of me, but you had a national occupancy of, let's just say, in the 65 and 70% occupancies, and that went down into the 10 and 15% occupancy range.
Yeah.
So just rough numbers, just take 100-room hotel that was selling 70 rooms a night, now is selling 10 to 15 a night. So you can imagine what that did to our staff that was working in the hotel. You can imagine the stress and anxiety that put on the ownership groups, because now they have bills coming in and they have commitments that they have to make over on that end, and there's certainly no track record now to take care of those things. So it was an incredibly tough period. The PPP program, I'll tell you, likely saved the industry. Now, those are my words, not national words, but I'll tell you, be it not for both rounds of PPP, I don't know how the industry would have survived.
Well, the upside is that the cleaning staff had a lot less weirdos to clean up after. So that's the one.
Probably a fair assessment. Probably a fair assessment.
So here's a hot button question.
Sure.
Is it true that hotel remotes are the most germ-infested thing that exists?
Well, not in any of our hotels, of course, but probably in some of our competitors. No, yeah, that's just
absolutely.
That's
some
right.
of your competitors.
That's just another high touch item.
Right.
And interesting about this industry, I'll tell you, we were in an incredibly clean industry already. Like prior to the pandemic, hotels were an incredibly clean industry. I mean, if you knew the standards that the major brands, put on us, and I didn't mention earlier, we franchised with Marriott, with Hilton, and with IHG, which is Holiday Inn. The standards on those brands are incredibly tough. I mean, it is a high hurdle from the cleanliness standpoint prior to the pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, it's even that much higher.
Right.
So hotels in general are incredibly clean and safe places.
Well, let me I'll jump in here. I've had a couple lawsuits because of significant injury or death that occurs on a hotel premises. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, what we do as a part of those lawsuits is, as you know, PJ, is we get a lot of information given to us by the hotel ownership group or management group, and it's about their policies. It's like whatever. We had a case where a ceiling collapsed on a guy while he was in the shower. Okay, and so there had been a leak that had been kind of, I guess you would say, Band-Aid, not fixed, and so they knew about it. And so we found their policies, and their policies were great. They were super. It was just because of a management group that was probably lacking in the funding to do the necessary repairs. They were trying to get away with the minimal, which, business principles, you're always constantly making business decisions, and it was just a poor business decision in that situation, and it ended up costing them. Luckily, they had, ample insurance. But when Claude says that it's an incredibly clean industry and all of the standards that are there in place to keep it clean, I've also found that to be true about their safety policies and policies with regards to maintenance and repair. It is crazy. Like when a maintenance repair slip is put in place to start the action, where it goes from there, and how it's tracked. And I mean, it is amazing to me. That's one industry where in fact, it's in some ways the discovery I've done with hotel cases. I've been more impressed than with some of our hospitals, as far as policy is concerned. So I have, from my side of the fence, Claude, I have seen that to be true, and so I can only imagine with something like COVID, where now you have a whole basically pandemic policy for cleanliness, and also traffic flow, and did they like open one set of rooms and then that set of rooms wouldn't get used until it went through I know they're normally clean, but now you have to go through all that stuff has to be thought of.
Yeah,
right?
so now we have to add in, like in some of the brands, not all of them, because they have slightly different policies between those three, and those are three of the top brands in the world, right? So while they might differ slightly in policy and procedure, there, it's only a minor difference in those top brands. But yeah, you're talking about an electrostatic sprayer now spraying those rooms down, and then has to sit for 15 minutes, and then the doors are stickered and no one goes in those rooms after they're sprayed, and then the guest checks in and knows the room's entirely clean from that standpoint. So
I can say this, so having done a whole bunch of cons and gone to festivals over the year, so I've stayed at a bunch of different hotels, some higher end. Typically we stay at the lower end hotels, and those tend to be the ones I have the most interesting stories, or have found some of the more sketchy things, like under the bed or behind the dresser. But when I stay in a hotel, and I think this is kind of the hypochondriac in me, but when I stay in a hotel, the first thing I do is I put the room through this what is essentially like a rigorous test. I do the towel test, where I hold the towels up to a light to check for stains, things of that nature, hairs. There's always that one random curly that you find in the shower, stuff like that. I'll pull the bed sheets back and check under the sheets, because I've always heard that crackheads hide their needles and things down there, and I'm always worried I'm going to get stuck and my foot gets stuck.
Do you really do all this, BJ?
Yes, I check under. I found essentially an entire box of condoms underneath a mattress one time, unused.
Okay.
Well,
but here's what
they stayed unused, just in case anyone's curious. But I'll pull like the tables and the dressers back and look behind them. I've found some very interesting things behind those, so I do that. So I say all that to say this. So I recently stayed at the Holiday Inn down on the riverfront not too long ago. Put the room through the same test, and it.
A+?
A+, yeah.
Okay,
that was unplanned. We didn't write you. I didn't know you were going to say that. I had no idea.
Yeah. So the towels were perfect. No curlies in the shower. I mean, there was nothing under any. There was nothing under any of the furniture or behind the dresser. It was completely like.
Man, great to hear. It was
perfect.
I saw Claude opening up his little notebook / calendar holder down there, and I think the note he made was future employee for quality control
inspector. I was going to say,
yeah. So I'm kind of worried that you're going to be poaching my employees here, Claude.
You can moonlight as
in the evenings.
You can moonlight as a quality control inspector.
Go over
That's right.
Be a quality control inspector.
We got the white gloves on you, and you can do the
I'm going to take you up on that
dust test.
As you all know, I'm hitting a new chapter in my life, and I probably need something
extra
to supplement.
Income. Okay, well,
quality control.
I will come climb under your beds and move all the furniture out and check behind. I found a black mamba box one time behind a dresser. That was one of the more interesting things I found.
Well, what I want to get to something, PJ, before we run out of time. I want to know how your paths cross with Claude, and then I want to share mine, because it's a little bit of an interesting chapter of my life and his life. You can't go through what we went through and not be an interesting chapter or two of your life. So, but go ahead first and share with our listeners how you met Claude, and kind of how you stayed in touch over the years.
So my memory sucks. So
you want me to tell a story?
Well, yeah. the way I remember it was River City Festival of Films. Isn't that how we?
Our very first one was when I called you about needing help with the television show that I was writing. Remember, I met you at the courtyard?
Yeah.
And then we broke into the relationship after.
Okay, so that was, and then that led into the film festival.
Into the film festival.
Gotcha. Okay, I couldn't remember exactly the
because I called you out of the blue, right? You remember?
Right.
Yeah.
Because we met at the hotel and we talked about everything.
That's right. We talked about the television show.
So that leads me into this. So that's a very interesting thing I think that you have going on is these television programs. And because you're a wealth of ideas when it comes to these really interesting television program ideas, and I know you have like relationships with KET and Dave Shuffett. So I mean, how did you get involved in that and coming up with ideas and working towards trying to get these TV shows off the ground?
Yeah. So just as a complete. Look, my life largely resembles that of Clark Griswold, right? So I have this, I'm a big ideas guy that then I execute on those ideas, but then it causes all kinds of comedic mishaps and all kinds of comedic things that are because of it, right? So I'm kind of this big ideas guy, and I love to be creative. It's kind of my hobby, to be real honest with you. So I had this great idea for a television show, and I kept telling my wife for like 2 or 3 years, I'm like, this is a great idea. This is a great idea. And like only a wife can, about 2 years of hearing that kind of kicked me in the pants and said, would you please just do something about it and quit talking about it? And I said, okay, I will. But there was only one problem. I had no earthly idea how to write a television show, where to send a television. Nothing. I knew absolutely nothing, which led me to my first interaction with PJ because he was the only guy that I had even seen in this town at the time that had anything connected to film. So I kind of called him randomly and said, hey, will you meet with me and just let me tell you this crazy idea I have for a television show and see if you can help me and guide me. And my idea, I remember this specifically, you may not, the idea that I had originally was a little bit more grand than you thought it should be, and you helped me dial it back so to where it really needed to be. And this is a much longer story. I'll save all of these television stories, but because of that, I wrote my first television show, submitted it, and got it accepted by a production company out of England who came here, and we shot our first pilot television show for them to go out and sell. And this was the show that I was talking to PJ about. That was a treasure hunting show. So that's how I intersected with Dave Shuffett, my great friend who was a longtime host of Kentucky Afield on KET, then host of Kentucky Life, and had a short time with a show called Kentucky Collectibles on KET as well. So I got the show greenlit essentially, and they came to Kentucky and we filmed our first pilot episode, and I needed a co-host. They wanted me to have a co-host. Dave was the only other guy that I really knew at the time that was a treasure hunter, like a metal detector guy. So I called Dave and I said, man, I need you. You want to do another television show, possibly that would go nationally? And he said yes. So he came here, we did the show. Interesting enough, that show was called Mudcat and Dollar Bill. Now, that was back in the day where transactional television was still pretty hot. So think American Pickers, think Pawn Stars, find it and sell it kind of stuff, right? So this was under Mudcat and Dollar Bill was the same concept. Now, Dave's nickname is Mudcat, so that was natural. The production company said, we need a nickname for you. And I said, well, it's just Bacon not good enough, right? As like my last name's, odd enough to where they're
Who doesn't love bacon?
Yeah, that's right. They're like, no, you need a nickname. You have to trust us. And they kind of got angry at me because I was kind of kept pushing back because I didn't know what they were going to end up with. So in this pilot episode, we're like digging in like an 1800s hotel, and we find like an old bottle as part of something. Now, maybe the bottle had a lid on it that was metal, and that's how we found it with the metal detector. So when we dig the bottle out, I said, Dave, if this bottle has no chips, that's dollar bills. So then the production company came back and said, your dollar bill.
There
you go. And I kind of pushed back, which they got mad at me again. I said, look, dollar bill really can't pass the plate at Sunday school and at church. So I can't be dollar bill, right? So they said, no, that's who you have to be. So anyway, we got through that show, and we were a little late at that time. There were already a couple of treasure hunting shows in the mix. So that same production company came back and said, we want to do a new show, and we want to call it Storm Kings. So we were a couple of treasure hunting guys that were following the storm patterns to find treasure. And they came and we shot another pilot on that one. And, I guess that's been as close. That one actually made it to the final table with a channel that everyone here would know. My contract keeps me from telling what that channel is, but we made it to the final table, and that show was almost going to make it, and they killed it at the final table. So I got as close as you can get to getting a television show without actually getting one. Now, these days, I still write television shows, and PJ and I were just talking about a new one. Nostalgia Hunters is one that I'm writing right now. Actually, is already written and is kind of out there. But I'll tell you, like, PJ is incredible talent. You already know that, and because he's here and doing what he's doing for you. But over this period of time, he has helped me in this world of television and helped me dial my ideas in to where, it's something that's, made a, small splash. I don't know.
It's just interesting to say. It's one of the things I enjoy about our podcast is, we get to interact every day with interesting people. If yesterday did not get to you, it got to me. We took a video of a man who had served our country in 3 different wars. Yeah. And
oh, wow.
I asked him, hey, just tell me about your service to our country. And he teared up and he got emotional. He couldn't talk. And I sat there and thought to myself, you don't see that kind of person much anymore, And it's one of the things that I'm so glad we do this podcast, Claude. It's because to hear people's story, like what you just told me. I mean, I had no idea about that with you.
And most people don't, to be honest.
I knew one part of your life.
Yeah.
But here you are. You're a major contributor to our community, I know of in a number of ways, active in your church. You have relationships with guys like PJ and stuff like that. And when we're able to, through this broadcast, that's what we mean, especially in this quarter, PJ, we're talking about the you and dedicated to you, and that's people, and people have stories, and just being able to bring some of those to light, I think is a great opportunity. So I appreciate you talking, but I want to kind of jump in and selfishly talk about
that's good.
Where our threads crossed in the tapestry. And I met you for the first time, Claude, when you came on to I was the chairman of the board of Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Yep, that's right.
And when I was the chair, we had lost some longtime members that had just basically, they'd been there and were worn out with board stuff. And so we were looking for new board members. Mm-hmm. And you served for a brief time with us at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Yeah. And after that, we stayed in touch because I had done in 2009 and 10 Ironman and a bunch of half Ironman, and I was an endurance athlete and had, for my age and age class, was pretty good at it, And I know that then a year or two later, I think it was in 11 and 12, you started getting into it pretty heavy. Yep. Is that right?
Yeah.
My memory serves me.
Yeah, that's right.
And you kind of picked my brain a few times about fueling for that, diet, things like that, and so, kind of how to save your legs and training and, that kind of stuff. And so we kind of stayed in touch, and I know that you went on to do an Ironman and have done many triathlons. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that I think you had mentioned before we came on was you have kind of taken your Ironman experiences and applied that to life lessons. And I want you to tell us a little bit about that.
So, I've been fortunate to cross the line twice in 2 different Ironman. I did Ironman Louisville in 2012, and I did Ironman Florida in 2018. then actually did my first 50 miler here in Owensboro just last year with a couple of great friends here in Owensboro, a 50-mile running ultra marathon. So essentially, you know, I was not an athlete growing up. Like, this was not part of my life until really I came to Owensboro and started doing some running, and I got into some 5Ks. And one of my greatest friends in the world, who had moved out to Austin, Texas, Carl Miller, he called me one day and he said, "You got to get into this triathlon thing." He said, like, Austin, Texas, the triathlon mecca of the world. And I've gotten into it, and it's just fantastic. It's just unbelievable. So it took me some years to build up, you know, to that, but the fear kept me from ever making that jump over into something as big as an Ironman, right? I would get up to a certain point and, you know, kind of get excited about it. And then I would start thinking about, you know, 2.4 miles in the Ohio River in the water. It was Ohio River in Louisville where I did the first time. And man, I'm telling you, it's just a brick wall of fear. And then you think about 112 miles on a bicycle after that, and then you go, oh my gosh, you know, that's a long way, you know, on a bicycle. And then you think about, you know, a 26.2 mile run even after that. And, you know, it's just incredible the amount of fear and anxiety that you have when you think about doing something positive in your life, right? So it was a big goal for me. So when I did it in 2012 and then in 2018, I started to find a seam that, you know, of these 8, 10, 12, 15 things that I thought could help others get across their finish line in whatever the size of the goal that was, right? So I created a program called What's Your Ironman? And that video is actually out there on YouTube. If you just type in What's Your Ironman ? Then I did a short video that basically I taped. That shows my age. I said taped. I taped one word a day over 6 months of training, and then edited all that together into a special message that basically says you can do it. I mean, you can do it. And so I'll save that for anybody that wants to go out and look and see what that video looks like, and maybe we can link it on the podcast too or something.
Yeah, we can do that.
I've seen it. It's pretty cool.
There's a couple of things that I would just mention. You know that. So I don't think. I think it's fair to say a day may go by that I don't think about something I learned or something I experienced or a memory that I have from my years of training and doing any Iron. I did the hottest Ironman on record. Was my year. It's the one where the heat index was 121.
Oh gosh.
There was pros falling out. You know, that was the highest DNFs than ever. And I just to give you an idea, that day I lost 10 pounds. You know, and I was taking in as fast as I could healthily, you know, do it healthy without getting gut ache and stuff like that. So it was that kind of. But I think about, you have a lot of time to think when you're on that bike and when you're running, and even when you're swimming. You think, believe it or not, you once you get into your rhythm, you think of other things, don't you? I mean, all the time, and not a day. You know, I would say in my life, a day or two doesn't go by where I don't think about something in my training, something I learned, something like that. And just recently, I'd gotten my second vaccination, and I was scheduled to take a very complex, difficult deposition the day after. Now, I had heard enough horror stories to know that I may need to have a backup plan, and so I had somebody else prepared to do it if I just couldn't. And I woke up that morning, and it was like a lot of mornings when I woke up sore, and I knew I still needed to pipe out a 50-mile bike ride and brick it with a 10-mile run, you know. And I was like, you have to do it, you know. And so I put my suit and tie on, drove to Bowling Green. When I got to Bowling Green, I tested my fever, and my fever was 101.2. At the beginning of the deposition. And I sat there and I gutted out about a 4.5 hour, 5 hour deposition. And all the way through that, I kept telling myself, there were a number of times I could have quit when I was training, but I didn't. And because I didn't, I crossed the finish line.
Yeah.
And I'm going to finish this deposition, and we're going to take this case here that I'm in to the finish line, you know. And could I have done that without Ironman training? Sure. But was it my frame of reference? Yeah, it was. And there's been a number of other instances. And I don't want to gloat. That's not me, but that's me telling people there are these lessons that you learn in that training that are life lessons, and for you to go about sharing them that way is awesome.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because one of the 10 that I talk about in my presentation is that your perception will change, right? So what you once thought was tough, after you cross your finish line, now just isn't as tough. What you once thought was long now isn't long. What you once thought was painful now isn't as painful. I mean, it's just your perception totally changes, and then you can draw back on that for everything else in life. And that's what's amazing about, look, Ironman's not for everyone. No. And my suggestion in What's Your Ironman is clear.
Did you notice he looked at me when he said Ironman's not for everyone?
But the message is clear in that that's not for everyone, right? That is clearly not for everyone. But I will guarantee you that everyone has that goal out there, that big goal, that stretch goal, the really big one, right? That's out there kind of floating around, but that same fear is keeping them from taking the first step.
Right.
And maybe you've even tried that first goal, right? Maybe you've even taken that first step, but then you failed. Failure is something else that I talk about. It's another one of my 10 that we talk about. That, so failure, your perception will change, surrounding yourself with the right people, just there's the 10 are great. And again, we don't have time to go through all those today.
Well,
but
definitely make sure you get the link on there, PJ, because that'll be, I think the listeners, and then I definitely want to check it out, because it's a... Well, listen, we always try to gauge these things to go anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. If I was guessing, we're pushing the envelope on that.
We're about there.
So
television shows, Ironman, hospitality business.
All this exercise talk, though, has reminded me that I have an entire box of Velveeta shells and cheese at home waiting for you for dinner.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to stimulate your interest.
You got to carb up. You got to carb up.
Yeah, Michael Scott, before he ran that big race, he ate that plate of fettuccine Alfredo.
Well, you do carb load.
You got a carb load.
Claude, thank you for your,
Hey, thanks for
PJ, thanks for inviting Claude, and we will get with you about how to get the links to our podcast on whatever social media you guys have, and that way we can cross promote everything. That's super. PJ, until the next time, man, we're going to wrap this one up. This has been more Law Light, brought to you by Foreman Watson Holtree. Check us out on all of the platforms of social media, and check out our website. And until next time, we appreciate all of you.
This case should never have come to trial.
I don't think it's fair to call my clients frauds. Because one time I turned into a dog and they helped me. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would like to withdraw our plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty.
This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries of a sham.
If we are to have faith and justice, we need only to believe in ourselves.
And the truth shall set you free!
How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Oh, guilty, but with a real good excuse.
I think the truth will come forth.
You can't handle the truth!